Hello everyone, my name is Alan Christopher. Today we're going to be discussing the echolocation of bats. Let's get into it. So we're going to discuss three main things throughout this presentation. Their sensory abilities, which is really just a marvel with nature's abilities and how it's evolved over time. We're going to discuss the echolocation and how it really is the star of the show for the bats. It really just lets them to kind of go above and beyond in their abilities when it comes to hunting to it's really their navigation system, their hunting system, everything. So we're going to discuss in detail sound production, the anatomy, and the object detection of the bats. So we're going to be going over three concepts, and each of these concepts will have subpoints through them. So the first one's going to be sound production, the frequency range, anatomical specialization, and object detection. So starting off with sound production and frequency range, here's how bats produce ultrasonic waves. So bats create their echolocation calls using specialized vocal cords in their larynx. These ultrasonic sounds, often above 20 kilohertz, which is far exceeding what us humans can hear, and oftentimes we can't even hear up to 20 kilohertz because by the time we're around loud sounds throughout our lives, like cars, planes, loud music, concerts, etc., we end up losing a lot of our hearing. I think mine really only goes up to 15 or 12 from when I last tested it. So for bats, it's really just a built-in sonar system. And it's finely tuned for detecting the smallest of prey because they really just go after things smaller than them that they can actually, catch, eat, and in comparison to humans, like I said, we ours goes up from 20 hertz, which is the lowest, like rumbling bass type of sounds, to up to 20 kilohertz, which is really, really high pitched sounds that would honestly probably annoy most of us. But for bats, it far exceeds that. And you can see in the image on the right, it's up to 120,000. So serious stuff. And what's fascinating is that bats utilize frequencies that are so high, and it's honestly like beyond for us to even conceive. And it's essentially like a superpower that we can't even comprehend. It would be like for us to think of a color that we haven't seen before. It's just hard to even imagine. And last but not least, their dynamic adaptability. So even more impressive is how they can adjust their calls based on their surroundings. They change the intensity, frequency, and timing of their calls depending on if they're above open spaces or something more dense and cluttered like a forest. And so this is essentially what's going to determine what makes their how they're going to use their echolocation. And so this is a visual here, and on the left you have a human vocal cord. On the right, it's a bat's. And so the bat's vocal cords are more elongated and elastic, whereas for ours, it's really just for audible speech, and that's about it. Second topic, we're going to be discussing the anatomical specialization. So, this topic is also really interesting because it kind of goes into how similar we are, but how not so similar we also are. So, in terms of physiology, the larynx, their larynx is uniquely adapted with structures like vocal membranes, which amplify the sounds, and their ears are specialized with a cochlea that processes these high frequencies, allowing them to distinguish between small, small differences from the echoes they get back. And comparing to us humans, um, we rely on our vocal cords for speech, and that's about it. But bats, they have evolved neural pathways in their brainstem and cortex specifically for echolocation. And it's really the evolved system that allows them to just adapt to their environment to thrive, and otherwise, they're not going to make it. The separation is really what's the evolutionary like divergence and really emphasizes how above and beyond their hearing and their echolocation on those abilities are. So in the visual to the right, I want to really focus on the tragus of the ears. And you'll notice they're pretty similar, but for the bat, it's a little bit different. Um, and this essentially allows them to aid It aids in vertical sound localization by modifying incoming sound waves, whereas we kind of just rely on the pinna and the brain processing for horizontal localization. Whereas even their tragus alone is just doing so much work. And lastly, for this point, we're going to discuss the behavioral link. These adaptations are really just perfectly aligned with their nocturnal habits, um, because their echolocation, it not only helps them through the dark, but also allows them to hunt and avoid obstacles with pinpoint accuracy. So it's really just it's just so far what we can even conceive because they're doing so many things simultaneously. They're using it to find their prey, as we'll see in a moment, and then they're also at the same time seeing what's in front of them. They could be flying through a forest, just a super dense forest with insane precision. And it's really, since they're creatures of the night, they're made for it. They've adapted and they've evolved for it. Continuing on, so here we have a visualization of their echolocation, and this is more so of how it's produced. They emit the sonar and how the sound bounces off and it returns to them, how they interpret it and how they visualize and essentially create a 3D environment just based off the sound that returns back to them. And then it also modifies its call patterns. Like I said, if it's an open space or if it's a really dense forest, they know what to do. All right, moving on. Last but not least, object detection. So in action, here's how they really find their prey and how they navigate whatever environment they're in. So in terms of hunting and navigation, imagine catching a mosquito in just a completely pitch black darkness while you're flying around at very, very high speeds. And that's essentially what bats are able to do. So through their echoes and echolocation, they can determine the size, shape, and even the texture of their prey. That's how far it goes. Their calls speed up as they close in. And so split second precision. They don't have a second to waste, even less than that. They're so much faster than us in terms of their reaction time and how they just perceive and comprehend the sound. It's so much faster than us humans. And whereas us humans, we mostly rely on our vision. And relying on sound, it's really just rudimentary at best. But bats, now they have this sense that's just honed over so many years, right? Think of all the evolution that they've gone through. And some of the best technology that we have, it outperforms it. And bats, we'll go into the image in a second, but they also play a really, really critical role in maintaining ecosystems. On the left, we have the example we were talking about. They'll send out the sonar like echolocation, it pings back, they know how far it is, the texture, everything. And then on the image on the right, we have it's essentially how the bats they eat the pests, excuse me, and then it protects the crops. And so what we're seeing there is it's a major rice pest in Asia, and since the bats eats those pests, it protects the rice, which is a critical source for food and income of the local people. And the value of rice loss prevented per day, an individual bat is directly prevents the rice loss. So it's really significant in these types of environments. So, in conclusion, we explored how bats create ultrasonic waves, the anatomy that makes it possible, and how they use these abilities to hunt and navigate. Their sensory systems are beyond impressive. They're just vital for maintaining balance in nature. And understanding bats, these creatures, it reminds us how much there's to learn from the natural world and why it's so important for us to protect it.